Hello and welcome to tonight's Place and Economic Development Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting including filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live, and these recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premise must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. So, first of all, appointments of substitutes.
There are no substitutes, Chair. Thank you.
And declarations of interest. No. So, public participation, I think we have none. So the minutes of the last meeting, do we accept that these are a fair record? Yes. So, item 5 is the development of a Worcester Play Plan update report, and I think it's Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members will hopefully recall that 12 months ago now we brought a report to this committee that outlined the under-provision of play space across the city, both for children's play areas and for youth play areas, but in particular youth play provision. And at that time we also confirmed that the Council didn't have a strategic plan or a policy that would guide our future investment decisions. On the back of that, committee approved some funding for us to appoint a specialist contractor to undertake a consultation and engagement exercise that would allow us to develop what we're now calling a Worcester Play Plan. We duly appointed Harper Perry Limited and they commenced their commission in November, and supporting Harper Perry is an internal project group which is sponsored jointly by myself and Sian, and is attended by a number of internal services who've got a stake in play. We meet regularly with Harper Perry, and back in the autumn we developed a consultation strategy signed off by yourself and Vice Chair. And basically that's included an online consultation portal and in-person engagement events at a number of locations across the city. On the back of that, we've also released press releases, social media. Our staff have put together a short video, and we've actually direct mailed a number of community stakeholders and schools. And you may have also noted around the city, in community centres and at play areas themselves, we've promoted via a poster with a QR code that enables people to click on the QR code and find their way through to the online portal. So in terms of the online consultation, that went live on the 9th of January, and we've included a link within the report for members to take a look at that. And basically what underpins that online consultation is an interactive map. So you can go onto that map and you can click on an area or a park or a playground, or you can comment on the city as a whole. When we put the report together last week, to that date, 345 people had entered responses, and the greatest number of responses were for the wider Worcester area, the Worcester area in general. And that was followed by areas such as the Pump Track and Pitmarston Park. And then on the back of that, the next most popular responses were for Gallivant and Cripplegate Parks, Waverley Street and Worcester Woods, and then a series of smaller play areas. There are a considerable number of sites that to date have received no feedback at all, and we'll come on to the fact that we've extended the consultation period in a moment. And anybody can access the responses by going on to the consultation portal and again clicking on a site or an area, and you're able to see other people's what they've left. The depth of the feedback we are really pleased with, and there have been a number of detailed and carefully considered responses that have left. They're really rich, and so it's going to be critical that we use those when we develop our Worcester Play Plan. And indeed, some people have also signposted us to parks and sort of best practice outside of the city. So again, that's not lost on us. We are Worcester, we want to do Worcester things, but it's important that we have a look outside for those areas where we've been pointed to. And so the online responses will be collated and analysed, and we'll present those back to members in June of this year. Like I say, that'll form and inform the Worcester Play Plan. Paragraph 3.8, we've included some of the common themes to the feedback which are emerging. And as I say, I won't run through them all, but the third or fourth bullet point down, just to say people are seeking both destination play and neighbourhood doorstep play. We'll come on in a second to what that means, but it's not just one thing. There's definitely a feeling that people want more natural play areas, so it's not just about slides and swings and roundabouts. They want to use the environment as it is, with perhaps just a little bit of shaping or reshaping. Definitely a theme around spaces for wheels, whether that be bikes or skateboards. And there's a definite feel coming out of play spaces needing to be safe. So they're not just about play, but for socialising as well, but needing to be safe as well as practical. I think, as expected, there's some feedback around not enough provision for children with disabilities. I think we were conscious of that going into this exercise. Seating for adults and children, again, something that's coming out as a theme. And I think when we reported back in March, we were quite pleased with where we thought we were with maintenance. But again, there are definitely some maintenance issues that have been flagged up to us, and they are being picked up currently with the operational team. I think one of the things that we have found is that having an interactive map of play areas in the city is not just going to be valuable for this process, but I think will be valuable moving forward, whether that be for reporting processes around maintenance, or indeed being able to capture people's ideas as we move forward. We've also done in-person consultation, and that kicked off with an all members briefing back in November that you may remember, and that allowed members to first give their comments and views on the type of play provision within their areas. And again, more recently, between Alan New and Anjali Fowler, we've offered all members an opportunity to meet one-on-one with council officers to provide more feedback if they wish. The crux of the in-person engagement, however, is outlined in paragraph 3.10, and the bullet points there set out where we've been when we were there, and that exercise has allowed us to engage with over 300 people, and obviously that includes parents, carers, as well as teenagers and children. 2 weeks ago, I think it was over half term, we also got our community engagement team back out into parks and open spaces to try and advertise the online consultation. We were hoping to do some in-person consultation as well, actually fill in survey forms when we were there, but people showed an interest in just being able to log on rather than do it in paper and pen on site. And again, over 100 people were engaged during that week. And again, through that process, similar themes have been picked up as part of the online consultation. However, based on the number of children and young people we've got in Worcester, which we think is about 10% from the recent census, we don't quite feel we've got the numbers that we would have hoped for, and therefore we've taken the decision to extend the consultation through to the 19th of March, just before the pre-election period kicks in, to help us get those numbers up. And we've noted in the report that the appetite from schools has been quite low. We have had officers in schools trying to up the interest there. And again, at the back end of last week, we've contacted schools again and offered for an officer to come into schools and actually sit within a lesson setting and promote and actually help kids fill the survey in as well. And we've also offered that offer out to community groups as well. Just to give a feel for the nature of the report that will come to members in June, like I say, what we will present to you is a draft Worcester Play Plan based on best practice that Harper Perry have picked up from not just the UK but further afield. We'll have been able to have reviewed and analysed the consultation feedback both online and in person. What it will do is set out some design concepts about what could work in Worcester, but it will be a sort of a visual and a spatial document. And it'll be centred around three approaches to play, which I mentioned a little earlier. So doorstep play, literally the rain has stopped. You want to grab half hour to do something. You want to find a very sort of hyper-local park to go and spend some time in. Neighbourhood play, one step up from that. Catering for up to 14-year-olds, but offering a wider range of play equipment and perhaps somewhere to spend a couple of hours. And then destination play. So for us at the moment within the city, we probably classify Gallivant and the splash pad as destination play. But there'll definitely be some more ideas around where we can improve that type of play within the city. So, like I say, further report to come back to June, and we'll be seeking approval of a draft Worcester Play Plan, and we'll also provide an action plan for implementation. Prior to that, we will want to hold an all-member briefing session again, probably during mid-May, where we'll present that plan to members in a closed environment and allow you to ask your questions ahead of committee. To hopefully make it a better debate. So this is a noting report, Chair. No decisions to be made, and happy to take any questions. We're conscious. I don't know that Sian wants to come in as well, Chair.
Only to add that we've got some of the consultation materials so far printed off at the back of the room, and I've got a big report on my system from the live place changes website, 800 odd pages. I'm happy to, at the end, if anyone wants to have a browse with me of what's live. I mean, it is still live place changes. You can go on and navigate the sites for yourself. But if you want any help with that, I'm happy to stay in and orientate people at the end.
Thanks, Lloyd. I just wonder when you're talking about what approaches you're going to have in the report to sort of bring back to us, how much scope there is to address this issue of the older teenagers and the youth provision, because it is certainly something which came through some of the consultation work that I was involved with. I know it's noted in one of your bullet points, and it's just a question that we don't really want to leave hanging in any way.
Sorry, what we've received through the consultation is a very clear message from young people, not just young children, and so I think we're fairly confident that what we'll bring you back in June will certainly address that older age element. And again, we meet with Harper Perry fairly regularly, and we've seen some sort of design concepts and pictures of what can be done. Not just new areas, but existing areas as well. So in a number of sites, things like muggers, where you tend to find young people or young, or older children play that perhaps aren't being used in the way we want them to. So yeah, I'm fairly confident that we'll bring some things back that will deal with that issue.
Chair, thank you. Basically, Adrian's excuse me, asked the question, but it's this question of young adults, isn't it? Clearly, when parents return consultation forms for their young children, toddlers, whatever, we know who we're reaching out to, essentially. But are we content that we've got our lines of communication right, as it were, to reach out to people who are perfectly capable of answering their own questions, but might not, we might not be reaching them in a most effective way possible?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think some of the events that we've held have been targeted at the sort of older children, young people. So we've certainly picked them up that way. And again, we can look through the online consultation as to the types of people that are responding to that. So, and again, we've specifically used Anne Nichols and the community engagement team, the team that do some youth detached work, to focus this area as well. So yeah, we know they can be not a difficult group to engage with, but a group that perhaps we don't get this type of engagement with usually. But like I say, I'm hopeful that what we bring back to you in June will tackle that. And we've definitely made an effort to try and engage with that group. And as I say, some of the work we've done in schools as well is definitely targeting that sort of 14, 15, 16-year-old age group. But I think one of the things that is coming through here that play to older people isn't just a mugger. It's about places to socialise, places to spend some time. So I think what you'll find in June is there'll be some areas that where it will just be socialising space, safe space, seating, and just some natural areas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, is there any comparison that we can make between the response you've had so far to this survey and other similar consultations before my time, if you like, in the city?
I might ask Sian to come in this one, but I'm not sure whether we've done a consultation of this nature before that's targeted children and young people or parents. So I'm not entirely sure whether we would have a reasonable comparison to draw. But we can certainly take a look, at what consultations we have run in the past and how that stacks up.
That have been around for quite a while. We did a consultation about 10 years ago on play areas and that sort of thing, but nothing recent. Sorry, Chair.
Just going to add, I mean, our response rate for the annual customer survey, resident survey, we get about 1,000 responses. We're up now to about 600, 650 on this. We've made a real effort to try and target young people as well as separately their parents and carers. The app, we spent time looking at how the app would be suitable for people who are over the age of 13. That was our kind of social media boundary, over the age of 13. The demographics on the online consultation tells you what percentage of people of that age bracket have filled it in themselves. And it's a decent proportion have engaged with it directly themselves. But and we also know that 2 specific sessions we held with teenagers, we know we were only speaking to teenagers because we invited them in and spoke to them. And the numbers we had for the second session, which actually was here in the Guildhall because we were literally inviting them in off the street, we had good numbers for that compared to the first numbers at the youth club. So we've seen them and we've spoken to them, but not in the numbers that we would have liked. And if we could have had a high response rate through the schools, I think that would have really helped. But I think it's an interesting point about stakeholders generally, that we did think we're going back a long time to think about when did we ask our children and young people what their views were in the city. We've tried to do this over a 2-month period. If we kept this running for 12 months, we're not advocating that we do, but if we did, maybe it's a slow burn and a campaign would build and more people come behind it. And maybe there's something for the council about a kind of leave a comment function, and if people want to engage with us generally, how do we do that in a way that works for them as well as a kind of snapshot survey? So I think there is learning for us in terms of stakeholder engagement, and I know David has referenced that as well. I think in terms of the numbers, we're trying to get to something which we think is statistically credible as much as anything, and I think that we've got quality, real qualitative feedback. We would like more quantity, but we will be drawing a line under it at this point because we do want to bring a plan back. And just coming back to the point about young people, when this came through this committee 12 months ago, we did have a specific recommendation which was voted for by everybody, which was, and in any event, irrespective of the survey, recognise that the data already shows a significant deficit and that there was universal commitment, I think, on a cross-party basis to investment for young people in the city centre, because the feedback we'd already had then referenced that young people wanted to come into the city centre at the weekends and socialise in this form of destination play, even if that's just a social space. So we already know that, and we don't need the consultation to kind of validate that. We already kind of have that in the bank, so to speak. It obviously will lead on to some challenging questions about investment and priorities, but I think that's already a given.
Thank you. Just to build on what Shana said, I think we've certainly had a discussion at leadership team about the response levels that we've got, and some of the areas or some of the stakeholders where we've got less response than we would have liked mirrors other pieces of work we've done, where certain areas, it's quite difficult to get any replies. Schools, for example, when we've done work with the museum service and asked, and offered to put on school events, it's been quite difficult sometimes. But I'm not obviously singling out schools in particular, but that's just one example. I think the question it asks for me is, are sort of stop-start consultations working, or is there a better way of doing it? Where, as Sian says, we need almost some sort of continuous engagement with certain stakeholders. Trying to do something from a standing start within a fixed period of time clearly isn't working as well as we like. So in terms of our engagement, we probably need to think of a different way of doing it and trying to do something better in the future, where there is a continuous engagement, so these things don't come along as a sort of start-stop series of questionnaires, if I can put it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the report as well. Great reading. I mean, in my experience with two schools that I have dealings with on a regular basis tells the same story, really. Speaking to the head of one school about play strategy, all I got back was youth clubs. We need more youth clubs. And another school was, well, I'll consult with the parents, because the kids' play needs are so specific to those kids that, the parents need to have that feedback, to provide that feedback rather than the school themselves. So I think, providing some kind of continuous feedback loop when we can in the future would be great, I think.
In my case, speaking, because obviously we live just down the road from the Mugger in Brecon Avenue that's been replaced, and the conversations that I've been having, that they've been really welcoming it, and it's certainly, I think, a really good piece of equipment, and in the right place finally.
Yeah.
To note the report. So, Zoe, Town Fund Heritage and Riverside project update.
Thank you, Chair. This is just an update, really. There is plenty going on with this project, but it's not obvious, so it's not on the ground obvious, but there is lots of activity, so it's just to give you an update on what that activity is. The project is in three parts. So we've got the Riverside project, that has established its board, it's appointed a design team, and it is developing what they are looking to do. They are also doing quite a considerable amount of fundraising to match fund the contribution from the Towns Fund. They've been successful with one funder, and they're awaiting details from another, which they should hear from in June. So it should be quite a decent funding package all in. The other element of that is St Andrews. St Andrews is going through various archaeological consultations at the moment to make sure that we're not going to do any damage to some of their heritage sites and vaults and crypts that could be within that area. So that survey is now being considered and reviewed just to make sure that it won't be affecting any of the work that we're about to deliver. There is also some consultation being delivered with tree officer, just to make sure that we're not doing any damage to any of the current established trees. The other element of it is the heritage activity with the gallery and the commandery. We did go out to secure consultants, but we didn't have a great response, and we were told from those people that did express an interest but didn't actually bid for it, that it was too big and that maybe it should be broken down into smaller pieces, which we've reviewed, and we're now going to do that, and we will be going out quite quickly with that piece of procurement. As far as the design for the shop and the reception, that's been completed, so that's in place now, and we'll begin work on that in January 2024. There is still some fundraising going on with that as well. They put in a number of applications. One was unsuccessful, but they still have another that is currently sat with a funder, and we've also got a commitment from the UK SPF programme as well towards those costs. And that's where we are at the moment. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I've got a couple of questions. 3.5, is the shop and reception at the commandery?
The shop and reception is at the Museum and Art Gallery. That is moving, so we have to wait until we can move the Soldier Gallery into the commandery, and then we'll do the changes to the Museum and Art Gallery afterwards.
Ah, right. No? Okay, so we note this report. Okay. And again, Zoe, Angel Place Market in the city centre.
Okay, we're actually making a recommendation to the committee that we look at, we agree a preferred option for how we take forward Angel Place and the current market operations for the city. So there has been an awful lot of work delivered in the past. We've commissioned specialists to review the markets, and we've done bought recommendations here before. The market, particularly Angel Place, has struggled in the past. It's had many difficulties. We have put in place various changes. So it's gone to, we've had specialty markets in the high street, that we've got, we have supported, as far as the local authority is concerned, post-COVID, with some urgency powers that came through the managing director. They've all now come to an end, so we're re-reviewing where we are with the market and if it is still a functioning going concern. We've done some consultation, we've spoken market operator, we've spoken to the market traders, and we've spoken to some of the customers on the street around the market, just to get some feeling of how things are going with the market and what they'd like to see. So we came up with 3 options. The first option was to look at street trading pitches rather than having an established market with a market operator. As far as the costs for those licenses and the management of that activity, actually it didn't provide us with the most appropriate opportunity to manage that area and that market. It could, for some of the market traders, it would have been prohibitive as far as the costs for those licenses are concerned. And it wasn't the easiest to manage because those street trading licenses increase the workload of our teams in identifying spaces for them that they can actually use for those licenses. The second option, which is our preferred option and the one we are recommending to you, is that Angel Place now becomes part of the wider high street market contract and is run by the market operator, but actually is included within that wider high street, so that if we've got specialty markets that are happening in the high street, they can actually spread round and be part of Angel Place. So it's a much bigger market space, and we've got a bit more flexibility with it. We've spoken to the market operator that is currently delivering, and he's happy to do that. And we've also spoken to the market traders, and they are comfortable and happy with that recommendation. It will be part of a wide the current contractor is happy to take on that contract, and it will then form part of the procurement for the market operators in the future. So option 3 was to give notice and close Angel Place. We don't recommend this. We have some very positive traders at the moment, and we have seen an upturn in footfall around Angel Place for the market. So our recommendation is that we go for option 2. Any questions?
It's not so much a question, Chair, it's just to support the preferred option. I think it's a sensible compromise. I would want to see was to lose a regular market, if I can put it that way. I think it meets the needs still in the city. But obviously, we've seen the success of those more bespoke markets in another location. So combining the offer and using the street scene effectively, more effectively, seems a sensible preferred option. So I'm really happy with the recommendation, Chair.
Happy to agree with Simon on that. The only thing I'd say is that I think the market operator needs to look carefully at what the positioning of the stalls in comparison to the existing traders, and just have a little bit of think about how far the market, the capitalist market, can sustain lots of different stalls of the same nature, and it's within spitting distance of each other, and things like that, really. They spread the offer across the city and don't disrupt some of the retail offer that is already there.
Absolutely. It will also form part of the planning for the future High Streets Fund for Angel Place. So there will be a review of how the market's set up and established, and we will include the market operator in that as to how we deliver that for the long term.
Just to pick up on Adrian's point, I do recall in the market agreement that we do make particular reference to adjacent or local retail businesses, and make sure that the operator does not, put a perfume stall outside a perfume shop, for example. So that is something that is in the agreement, and we'll make sure that that's correct.
Recommendation is that the committee agrees to the preferred option to continue with a market operator model and award the contract of Angel Place Market to the current operator of the High Street Market for the remainder of the contracting period. So are we in favour? Thank you. So the proposed committee performance score sheets.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shane would normally do this, but Shane's warming up some new council candidates, I think, at the moment this evening, if that's the right phrase, if you know what I mean. The proposed committee performance scorecard, if we run to Appendix 1, you'll see a list there of the projects and activities that we are incorporating into the 23-24 scorecard, plus some new activities mainly focused on UK SPF projects. This committee in particular has a rather large number, generous number of projects and activities within its bailiwick this coming year. There are a couple of projects removed or proposed to be removed. You'll see that as complete. And then we have a series of KPIs. A couple of points I would make on those. First thing, and I'm sure, well, Sean may wish to comment on this, or Duncan may wish to comment. With regard to the plan applications, members will know that in the past we've had concerns around planning performance, and so we're particularly keen to make sure that the indicators that we are using in terms of reporting to members are those same measures by which we will be judged by government. There's no point in reporting a different set of measures to you to those that we're reporting back up the chain, as it were. So that's one point. And then secondly, just moving down, I won't go through any of the other indicators. I think they're sort of self-explanatory, but there are a number of areas where we are seeking to remove those indicators. Those relate mainly to skills and ERDF, and the reason those are being recommended for removal, of course, is first of all, UK SPF has replaced ERDF as a funding programme, and in terms of skills, some of our skills funding will not be appearing until year 3 of our UK SPF programme. So I think that's the reason there. I would ask if anybody wishes to add any comments. Zoe or Sean wish to add anything to those points around planning or UK SPF? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. The planning, the development management planning performance targets we wish to keep as they have been. So for the first year, we've reported faithfully against the government targets, and we want to keep that going for another year. And you'll remember last year when we discussed it as a committee, we added a target relating to householder applications, and so we're reporting that. But I did just want to respond on a point that the committee have made before about a target that relates to planning enforcement. And it's timely in the context of the fact that we've brought before you a planning enforcement plan because the NPPF says we should call it a plan, so it's another plan. But anyway, you know, a performance measure itself of how we're approaching planning enforcement. And so Duncan and I have discussed, since the feedback we had from committee, what would a planning enforcement target look like in a scorecard, because that would be a quantitative measure, and behind that quantitative measure would be a whole story of all kinds of different scenarios. So we're proposing two things. We are proposing introducing a numerical target onto the scorecard, and I'll ask Duncan to comment on that in a minute. But to supplement that, we're also proposing an annual seminar in closed session where we will update members who have, you know, because members clearly have a ward level interest in planning performance. And if we update you in closed session, we can tell you a little bit more about some of the cases than we can if we put a numerical target on a scorecard. So we're proposing to report planning enforcement through two different ways: a quantitative measure on the scorecard and a qualitative measure, which would be an annual briefing, which would be a two-way flow of information about planning performance. And we can talk at a ward level, or we can talk at a slightly more macro level about the themes that we see and how we try and tackle them. And would you like to come in and talk about the actual quantitative measure?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members, coincidentally, not long at all after the consultation that we've been discussing with you on changes to the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, on the 28th of February, the government started a technical consultation on stronger performance of local planning authorities, supported through an increase in planning application fees. And you might be wondering, why am I talking about planning application fees when we're talking about performance? Well, that consultation includes a number of proposals relating to the planning performance regime, and one part of that relating to planning enforcement. So if you'll bear with me a moment, the consultation started on the 28th of February and runs through to the 25th of April. And it's seeking views on improving performance of local planning authorities by, number one, increasing fees for applications, number two, building capacity and capability, and number three, all important, introducing a more robust performance regime. And as part of the consultation, the government is proposing three possible measures relating to enforcement. The average number of weeks taken to respond to suspected breaches of planning and determine the appropriate course of action. It's not clear what respond means. Number two, average number of weeks taken to take action where a breach of planning has occurred. Again, not clear at this stage what take action might refer to specifically. Number three, a little bit more straightforward, total number of cases over 8 months old as a percentage of all open cases. I think the point here is that you'll be well aware from enforcement cases in your ward that there are those that are complicated, contentious, and take time to negotiate and try to resolve. And sometimes those will take not months, but years, unfortunately. There are others looking from the other end of the telescope that are relatively straightforward and easily resolved, often through voluntary action by the landowner or homeowner. So what we're looking at that Sian was referring to a moment ago is a measure that could be described as, of those cases closed between set dates, so typically closed within a quarter, the percentage of cases closed within 12 weeks of receipt. This is a measure that I know of a number of authorities that are already using this measure. 12 weeks is generally seen as a reasonable period of time within which to communicate and negotiate, if necessary, with the contravener and the person that has raised the issue with the City Council. And it enables us to focus on some of those cases that ought to be dealt with and resolved more quickly, and not lose sight of those when we're trying to juggle the more complicated cases that are complex, contentious, and maybe relate to major developments. So I think that's the measure that we would recommend to you for inclusion on the scorecard going forward. Thank you, Chair.
As far as KPIs related to UK SPF, we won't have any for people and skills this year, but what we may do is come to the committee to agree them anyway, because we are going to be looking at procurement this year. As far as business is concerned, our contract will be signed April time for 2023-24, and then it will be done the following year with government 24-25. So they are contracting on an annual basis. So as soon as those have been agreed, then we will know what our KPIs are as far as community and local business is concerned. So we will hear something by June as to what KPIs we'll have related to those elements of the UK SPF programme, and we will bring them back here for your agreement.
No?
Thank you, Chair, even though I hadn't volunteered. So I was, during the last meeting, I was talking about maybe having an indicator of how we were doing on affordable homes. And I think during agenda briefing, we thought that might be a good idea. So I'm just wondering if we still think it's a good idea and what we can do about it.
Just to, I know others will want to come in, but just to start on that particular one, we've talked about the fact that a lot of our indicators are lagging indicators. So, for example, homes completed, is very much after the event. In terms of planning permission has been granted, the development has taken place, and then sometime down the track, hopefully, you get homes built and everybody's happy. And there is lots of press, blaming local authorities for failure to deliver housing numbers. As you would imagine, I think they're generally unjust in terms of criticisms. We've talked about whether we could or should have a leading indicator, which is, for example, the number of planning permissions granted. So you can look at both the numbers that are coming out at the end of the machine, but also understand what volume is going in at the beginning. And that might give us a better indication of if the volume that we are giving consent to, whether that's affordable homes or general market dwellings, is way above the need, but the numbers coming out at the end are way below. We know we've got a problem in supply chain or in developers or whatever. It's not the city council that through the planning process is denying or delaying consent. So we have talked about a leading indicator around the number of permissions we are giving, whether that's a total or whether that's broken down as a total plus an affordable level. I mean, I think colleagues would be able to comment on that. What's the easiest way to do that?
Thanks, David. I kind of agree with you there on consents, and an actual would probably be a good way forward on this. But I'd prefer to see both, you know, total and affordable.
So we checked back, thank you, and we were going to come on to your point, Councillor Norfolk, absolutely, because you have asked for this, and of course this is a point that the council is interested in at the moment, is performance on affordable housing. We've started talking about that more actively. So we checked in to understand what's being counted and where it's being reported at the moment, and what we have at the moment is we're reporting annually on completions of affordable housing. We're doing an annual data shot which is being shared with Communities Committee, and that's on completions, and that's only been counting Worcester, not the wider Worcester area. So that's been missing a trick, really, counting where actually we've got nomination rights over the border. So we've had that conversation with officers about needing to count that more widely. There's a question for us about the purview of PED Committee and Communities Committee, which we'll take offline. But I think we've very much heard the message that we need to show the quantum of affordable housing that's being achieved to meet Worcester's needs, which will also relate to wider Worcester. And we also need to show, so arguably that's a target for Communities Committee, and we also need to show how planning performance is contributing to that through the granting of consents at the start of that process, which is arguably a target for PED. So I hope that's not too gymnastic or to split them out that way, but I think that would probably work so that communities are measuring the overall quantum through whatever routes that's achieved, whether that's through planning gain or more direct intervention by the council or whatever, because that's obviously something that Communities Committee is going to talk about at its next meeting. And this committee should focus on the start of the process through consents through the planning process. So if that is supported as a way forward, we've put that target in on that basis.
And
does that make sense?
yes. Just before I bring Simon in, obviously these performance indicators are reported here, but do they perhaps need to report them to the planning committee as well at some, maybe every quarter or something like that, as a way of
Through you, Chair. It is difficult in our committee system to find the right home for everything without having too much duplication. What we have we try and keep planning committee as a regulatory committee to conduct the business of development management. But what we do have in our constitution is an annual mechanism for the planning committee to review what's gone well, what's not gone so well, which isn't just the roadshow of sites, but there's also in the constitution it talks about a report about complaints, customer service and so forth. So we can certainly add performance into that, but I'd advocate that that's part of an annual report, if that's okay.
Yeah. Simon. Oh, sorry.
It was just on a different point, really, because I've got no fixed views about how they should be reported to planning committee or otherwise, but I think the principle that Robin was talking about is a sensible one in terms of monitoring forward look as well as completions. My point was on a different one, which was in relation to the two measures around the health of the city centre, so footfall and also voids, which we're committing only to receive data only. My concern with that is I think we need some comparable measures. What is a healthy city centre? So we aspire to drive up footfall and obviously look at reducing voids. And so some comparisons with other like-sized cities, comparable nature to Worcester, I think would be helpful, because I think we ought to set a target. You know, residents would see that as a sort of health measure of the city centre, in terms of if we have a lot of empty shops, empty active frontage, if you like, that does have an effect on people's perception of the city centre, as would thinning out of footfall. So I can understand reporting data, but I think it shouldn't be in the absence of a target as well. So I'm not proposing a particular target tonight, but I do think we ought to think about that and set them. And just on the planning enforcement bit, for my two pennyworth, I think that I totally understand there are complex cases, and wherever, quite a few in my own area. What would be useful, I think, for local members is to have an annual update on those. So rather than have a general conversation about the numbers, actually a more in-depth conversation about those really complex, knotty issues that we all know are difficult to tackle, but at least on an annual basis, to have that progress to the individual members who represent those areas, so they don't have to keep going back, because they understandably pick those up from residents and want to know where they're at.
I'll be bringing back the UK SPF targets in June, so I can definitely bring back a footfall indicator or recommendation for one for your approval in June, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point that I should have made in relation to the live consultation on fees and the performance regime is that we're told to expect the introduction of the fee increase in the summer this year. So we should expect the new performance measures to be introduced as well. So it would make sense to keep the scorecard for this committee under review, and later in the year we may want to introduce those measures into our own scorecard, just to pick up the point that David made earlier about making sure that the two marry up. So. Okay. So, through you, Chair, the headlines are that we're likely to see fees for major applications increasing by 35%, and for other applications probably 25%. But most importantly, the government's talking about indexation. So rather than the ad hoc approach that we've seen in the past, annual increases to reflect inflation. In the case of in the case of application fees increases for householder applications, for example, the current fee of £206, we're probably looking at an increase to £258 if the consultation proposals go ahead. But I think more interestingly, removal of the free go for repeat applications is being proposed, and a double fee payable for retrospective applications, with the exception of householder applications. So there are many elements to the increases. So it will be interesting to see later this year what makes the final cut. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions on this matter? So, we're asked to approve the proposed content of the committee performance card, with the proviso that obviously what we've heard tonight is also included as well. So, those in favour? Thank you. And finally, we've got the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, the reforms to the National Planning Policy, and it's Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing significant to add to the report, as you'll see that the recommendation is that the consultation response which has been submitted is noted this evening. The consultation closed on the 2nd of March, so there wasn't time to bring the item to you before our response needed to be submitted. But you'll see responses to all 58 consultation questions. Happy to answer any questions that you might have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Got a comment and a couple of questions, if that's okay. Page 14 of the appendix says, I'm looking at the right one in my 23-page appendix, is that correct? Question 40. I'd just like to praise the council for coming back at the government. I mean, it's 2023, and I'm reading this sentence: the government has not proposed any specific changes to the framework to support climate change adaptation. Absolutely bonkers. But fair play to the council for saying that's not on and coming back with some specific proposals to respond to climate breakdown. So I just want to praise the council and express my shock at the government. Page 7, I have a question about question 19. Because I'm not going to pretend to have read the national policy, planning policy framework. So I have no idea what an 115% switch off figure means. So my first question of 2 is, what does that mean? And my second question relates to the covering report. Under 4.1, and it says there's no requirement to review or alter the green belts when producing local plans if this would be the only means of meeting the objectively assessed need for housing over the plan period. Now, I don't know whether that's because I don't understand that because I've got ADHD, or whether that is really difficult to understand. Could someone explain to me what that 6th bullet point means? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Is it okay if we take question 19 first of all? Because I might need you to direct me a little bit more on the covering report. But question 19 relates to the housing delivery test, which is distinctly different from the 5-year housing land supply test. And the presumption in favour of sustainable development is where if you don't meet or exceed the housing delivery test, then the way that we look at planning applications changes. And what we've seen recently is where the City Council applies the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and in certain situations would grant planning permission for something that may not fully accord with the development plan, in our case, the South Worcestershire Development Plan. So I think the way to look at the question and the answer to this question is that what is being proposed through the consultation is helpful to local planning authorities like ourselves, and it takes some of the pressure off, some of that pressure that has existed up until now. And if the government's proposal is carried forward into the next version of the NPPF, local authorities would say we will much more often be determining planning applications in accordance with our development plan, and we will be operating a plan-led planning system, which is exactly what we should have, and not a system where developers can use these sorts of tests to get planning permission for something that we really don't want to be granting them. I hope that helps.
Yeah, particularly the last sentence. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Again, through you, Chair, if you could direct me to the section in the covering report that you were referring to a moment ago.
So I can do at the same time. So it's under the heading draft NPPF. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th bullet point down under 4.1.
Okay.
And it starts, no requirement to review or alter the green belt. And I just couldn't get my head around what the consequence of that bullet point is. What does it mean?
Okay. So I think probably the best way to explain is that there are instances where a local planning authority might feel that it has no option but to release greenfield land for development. That might be housing, it might be employment development. But what this is saying is that, or what the government is saying through the consultation, is removing that pressure to do that, to try and give local planning authorities more power and endorsing an approach which is to keep green belts intact and not necessarily meet objectively assessed need, but meeting that need as best the authority possibly can, but without eroding the green belt.
In my defence, I did think that's what it said, but I'm glad I've asked the question because you've clarified something positive and it's now a matter of public record. So thank you very much.
Questions? Jill?
Thank you. When I looked before, I did find your response and I can't find it now. But the striking point about beautiful buildings and refusing ugliness, how is that going to work?
I think most consultation responses that I've seen and commentary on this consultation is suggesting that the planning system and national policy is better without the word beautiful in it, and that actually we're well served with terms like high quality. Because otherwise many public inquiries are going to be argued over what's beautiful to one person might not be to another. It's very subjective, where what we're trying desperately to do is to make design objective. Thank you, Chair.
Really just to follow up that other point, because I actually welcome the push to have more distinctive characters to dwellings, because I think some people would reflect on perhaps the blandness of design at the moment in the planning system that is driven by numbers and certain percentages and doesn't reflect the character of the area. So whether beautiful buildings are the right phrase, or distinctive, or looking at the character of the area, I think what the planning policy changes are looking at is having something that's more reflective of the area. Therefore, you don't have a developer simply rolling out a house style wherever it is in the country. So you have communities look very similar in terms of those new builds. So however we reflect that back to the government, that they might be onto something about distinctiveness, but beauty might be still in the eye of the beholder, and therefore you have to have some way of squaring that particular point.
Any other questions? If not, we note this this report. So, thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. And I don't think there's any other business, so declare this meeting closed.
Thank you.